Thanks, everyone. We're right after lunch. I hope you're all happy here now that had time to eat something. Just want to say this is a fantastic, fantastic event. I mean, I'm just so privileged to be here. I want to thank FII for coming to Latin America and to Rio, of course, where we have several bottlenecks, but a main hurdle, which I would say is attracting investment. I mean, attracting investment is lack of confidence in our region. And to sort of like get the gist of this, I have a very distinguished and incredible panel. So we're going to hear a lot about this, investing in the region and investing in dignity. That's why we're here, a most needed dialogue in the region. So my distinguished panel from my left, Abdulrahman Bakir, Managing Director Americas, the Saudi Ministry of Investment. He is looking at our region with a keen eye. Eduardo Sirotsky Melzer, Chairman, CEO, and Managing Partner at EB Capital, looking from the Brazil side. He has a great insight into the region as well. Sheng, no, out of order, I'm so sorry, Mark Price. I pulled Mark, he is here, Regional Head of Markets, Middle East and Africa for Standard Chartered, and Hsia Sheng, founder and Vice President and Executive Director of the Bank of China, and of course, last but not least, Andrew Weinberg, founder and CEO of Bright Star Capital Partners. This is, I'm really, really privileged to be with all of you here, looking at this and how we can, find ways or how your vision is on the region. So, Bakir, I would like to start with you. So you are on the front lines of bridging this gap in dialogue and confidence, keeping an eye in the Americas, all the way south. So which sectors in Latin America offer the most compelling opportunities in your view? And do you see any mistakes being done by people looking at the region?
Boa tarde, excelências, senhoras, senhores. Thank you for having me. And Cecilia, just before I answer your question, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge His Excellency Minister Khalid Al-Faleh. When I spoke with him, I told him Brazil is a region, and LATAM specifically, is a region that you need to experience it, feel it, see it, and live it to understand its business potential. And His Excellency Minister led a historical delegation to Brazil in July last year with more than 100 people from the Saudi private sector, visited 7 countries. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it today, but please let's give him a round of applause for helping to make this happen. In terms of sectors, obviously agriculture would come into mind as LATAM being the food basket of the world. But 2 other sectors come to my mind as well are healthcare. In fact, our son Sultan, who's almost 2 years old now, we had an incident earlier this year, and unfortunately we had to take him to the hospital when we were in January. Fortunately, we were in Brazil. We took him to a hospital, Syro-Lebanese, and the experience from check-in to the quality of the medical devices, the quality of the doctors, the nurses, is just unbelievable, something that I've never seen in my life. And I always said if Syro-Lebanese had a different zip code, probably in the US or in Europe, it would have been in the top 3 hospitals globally. And healthcare is just going to go growing. I see one of the CEOs here, Zivi from True Care, who are talking also with Saudi now in terms of healthcare facilities that's bringing home care. So there is a lot of demand when it comes to that sector specifically. The second one is tourism. Obviously, tourism is a major driver for the economy of different countries here in LATAM due to the contribution of the GDP or the employment rate. It's always driven by tourism here. But I remember when I was in Colorado a few months ago, we were talking to one of the restaurant owners, and he told me that the average tourist from LATAM spends 4 times more than the average tourist from North America in his restaurant. So not only investing here in tourism in the region, but also attracting tourism into Saudi as we open up, and I see our Deputy Minister of Tourism is here with us here today. We need to get more tourists from LATAM into Saudi. So those are the two sectors that come into my mind now, Cecilia.
Rio Riyadh, it even, it goes well. It's a good slogan there. Eduardo, you have like a privilege in this panel here from being from the region, being here, born and raised, so you understand our bottlenecks from the start. So what would you say was the riskiest bet you've made, so that would show that kind of like emblematic of this issue of confidence?
Thank you, Cecilia. Thanks everyone to share this time with us. It's lunchtime, so we are not only hungry, but we expect that you guys pay attention to, to what we have to say, because we are very proud to be here, Bakir. And by the way, Bakir, in the beginning of the panel, he said, let's make sure that we do 60 seconds each one. He took 4 minutes. But it's exciting. It's exciting to be here. Thanks, everyone. Let me tell you, Cecilia, this is a tough question, because just to be a business person or an entrepreneur in Brazil, it's challenging. It's always a bet. But the biggest bet by far that I had in my life, in a professional life, was to found my own company. Brazil, we love Brazil. I'm committed to Brazil. We believe in Brazil. But Brazil is not a friendly country when you talk about being an entrepreneur. The fabric of I would say, the governance system, it's not the most, I would say, efficient one, okay? So it's very risky to start your own company. It's not easy, But my passion resides exactly because of that. I'm committed to Brazil. I believe in the country. You just mentioned some fantastic sectors and areas, and I want to make sure that we release all of the benefits and the potential of this country. Latin America, and specifically Brazil, it's one of the few regions, globally speaking, that you have more opportunities than capital. So why don't people take advantage and international players take advantage of that? It's not easy to play here. You gotta, we were talking before and we're saying, well, we cover Latin America from Miami. That's not the way you can really play the game. The intricacies and I would say, the specificities of this country makes it very difficult for investors to operate here. So we try to position ourselves as the bridge for investors to feel secure to come here with credibility, with market knowledge. Our position in Sicilia is that we have to have deep sector expertise, but have really foot on the ground and understand the market in Brazil. So that's, I would say, my first interaction, and we have the chance to discuss more.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned, that it's difficult. Brazil is not for beginners, right, as the sense
yeah,
saying.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I think that it's a common ground for Latin America. Like Latin America in general is not for beginners, and there are several idiosyncrasies, but also peculiarities. And Mark, I want to go to you because there's one of them is that SME, small and micro and medium-sized businesses are a major component of the economies across the board in the region, but also they probably have the hardest time in financing, finding financing and being funded. So how do you bridge that gap?
Thanks, Cecilia. It's a real pleasure to be here, so thank you for having us today. So I sit on the banking side of things as opposed to the investing side of things. And you're right. The challenge that I see is that in Latin America, very similar to Africa and the Middle East, the area I cover, the challenges around how do you get the funding into the small, medium, micro-size enterprises. And that's something that the banks are no longer set up and capable to do. Standard Chartered, the bank I work for, in its past, was very deep locally in the markets, providing capital, but in a way that we just cannot do with the current banking capital requirements, post-GFC, et cetera. So we've had to morph our role to look at how we connect pools of global capital to get that capital onto the ground in the markets that we still cover. And I think that's where the partnership, I think, needs to be built between the investment community, the asset managers, the end investors, and the banks, to try and really think about how we get that capital to those SME businesses. We do it in the developed markets. We see those funds or we see those securitizations in the West, but we don't see it in the emerging markets. So constructing those investment opportunities, attracting the investors in a way that means that the SMEs can get their financing at an attractive enough level for them, and the banks can provide the financing to the funds in a way that gives the leverage to the funds that means that the investors get the returns they want. It's that partnership, I think, that helps us bridge that global investor wanting to get involved, but in a way that makes sense from their returns perspective, but also makes sense to the people that need the capital. Because if we price it too richly, then it doesn't help them, and it doesn't build the economic growth that these communities should be looking for them to propel.
Yeah, it would be great because you have a vision from a region that has several similarities with Latin America, so it's a great lesson to hear. And Sheng, we were talking before the panel when you mentioned that more so than also within the challenges is actually deepening connection. So can you tell us a little bit about that? I mean, because we see Asian investments in the region growing, but this connection that you're talking about, if you can tell us what your thoughts on that, they were very interesting.
Thank you, Cecilia. I think when we talk, if you look at the previous section, many very successful cases of innovation, basically in the modernization of a very traditional industry. So for Asian investor, specifically Chinese investor, when they come here, probably they are looking on the very niche, we call the niche, only the field where he is very specialized. So if you look at, for Chinese bank, for example, we are very, very good, for example, to help company to do the modernization or upgrading their machinery, the whole supply chain. As we saw in the morning, that team, I think the telephone company Ching president said that the world changed. Now you have things connect to things, not only the people connect to the people. And we also said we also can realize that a lot production process need to improve. So there are a lot possibility and opportunity for funding. So that's what we do, and the Bank of China do pretty well, has this purpose to help Brazilian company and Latin American company to do this modernization. As our Vice President, Mr. Alckmin said in this morning, Brazil is running the new industrialization. So that's a huge opportunity, not only for me, but that's also for Brazilian player and the international player, not only in the very innovations field, but also the traditional field, to help this company to do the transition to the renewable energy economy. So I think this.
Yeah, that's Eduardo said. We are the land of opportunity, not necessarily the land of capital. So I'm happy that you guys are talking about having capital come here, and but the difficulties of making it happen, right? So Andrew, how do you see that? I mean, in your view, is there a major hurdle, or do you see a policy change or an infrastructure initiative that could increase this confidence in the region in actually coming here?
Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks for having me today. I'd say I'm not an expert on policy. Obviously, we benefit from having so many policymakers here. I can say a couple things. So we've chosen in the region to really have the right partner, and I think Eduardo and I share a partner, Marcelo Clare, and I've worked and invested with Marcelo for 20 years, and 20 years in the region, and observed a couple of things. You mentioned policy change, but obviously for those who are experts, it's not one region, right? It's not one place, okay? We group it together because it's 7 to 8% of the world's GDP and 7 to 8% of the world's population, and makes it convenient, but obviously operating it's many different countries, many different policies. I do think there is a common thread. I think the energy transition is something that we've chosen to lean into. We recently bought a services business around minerals and metals needed for electrification. So we've chosen not to be the asset owner because that can be very specific to a country in terms of policies around that. But the service umbrella actually is something that has been open to all players, and we're able to bring the best expertise from the entire region to each opportunity. And if the region thinks about, look at the Australia model, 2% of the world's GDP and maybe 0.5% of the world's population, if you can get a ratio of, let's say, 2 to 1, not 1 to 1, I think that affords more investment opportunity. I do think the maturation of the capital markets continues. Again, we've invested here for a long time. The cost of capital, thanks to folks like Mark, keeps coming down with familiarity with the region. And I think the more stability we see on a geopolitical basis affords the ability to lean in more.
Bakir, I'll come back to you because you've been observing the region, right, and looking at it from this eye of, like, increasing this connection and this growing connectivity with the kingdom specifically, but with the eye on what's happening here. So I want to ask you, what mistakes have you seen being made on people that want to come to Latin America?
So, Celia, I remember when last July, when we did the visit with Minister Khalid Al-Falih, we had around 100 people from the Saudi private sector. And as soon as we started to review their investment strategy, I noticed that they just developed one strategy thinking it's fit for the whole LATAM. Frankly, doing business in Sao Paulo is totally different than Bogota or Buenos Aires, so they can't just have that assumption. And that's the most common mistake, and my advice is to really invest in local know-how, have boots in the ground, try to understand the market dynamics, and then your investment will be more fruitful. But just having that assumption without trying to understand the market dynamic would actually make also further mistakes into you. One important point I want to mention, at the ministry, we went one level even down at the country level in Brazil. We started to understand the market dynamics within the regions. So also doing business in Sao Paulo is very different than Rio or Porto Alegre or Minas Gerais. So that will also really help the market. Last tip I want to give to my Saudi colleague, make the most out of being here in the FII. Richard and Florence always bring the right people together. So for them bringing the talent here, you will find people here, talent here in this room, in this hall, to help you in understanding the local dynamics and market, what's happening in the market, so you can hire them when you want to expand into the LATAM region.
Yeah, I mean, I want to second that because it's just incredible. Just the conversations I've been having, and I'm not loaning money to anybody. I'm not investing myself, but the conversations have been incredible in learning about, the different dynamics in across the region. Eduardo, you are in this sort of like doing this bridge for investors coming here. So, what do you say when people come to you is a common mistake or misconception that you would like to clear?
Yeah, I think, you kind of touched that before, which is you cannot invest or understand this country specifically by the headlines, okay? Headlines are important, but they just show a picture. This is a long-term country from an investment perspective. Brazil is fantastic from its, I would say, solid institutions. Capital markets are maturing a lot. It's a huge country, in terms of consumption and population. And as a Brazilian citizen, I feel sorry for the inefficiencies of the country, but those inefficiencies are the most valuable business opportunities. Because when you have the ability with investments, with know-how, with the right partnerships, to help solve those inefficiencies, you're creating an amazing business opportunity, fantastic returns, and also helping to develop the country. So that is my passion running my company, okay? But the biggest mistakes, Cecilia, that international investors do in Brazil are the mistakes that you learn really early on in your career that you cannot make, which is you invest when it's high and you exit when it's low, because you're afraid. You cannot be afraid. You have to partner with the right people, but you cannot come when everybody came or everybody's coming and leave when there's a hiccup, because Brazil is a cyclical country. But you have to have the ability to hold on, you know, fasten your seatbelts, and in the end of the day, it's going to be great. And we are here for several generations investing in this region, investing in Brazil, and you can see that. And one last thing, I've seen here in this room several really important business people from Brazil, guys who own, you know, like third, fourth generation, fifth generation of fantastic companies like Klabin, for instance. And these are like huge global companies, you know. So there's fantastic rooms in these, fantastic opportunities in this country.
Right. Need equals opportunity, right? Especially what we were talking about yesterday. The region has a chance to leapfrog in certain areas just because there's nothing there, right? So it's an opportunity. Mark, I'll go to you on your experience in a region that has similarities but differences. But with the similarities, what in your experience would be a learning that you think would apply to Latin America from your experience in Africa and Middle East?
So I'd certainly echo what Eduardo just said. We've literally just opened a branch in Egypt in January of this year, probably at the lowest and weakest point in terms of that country for a very long time. And we did a little bit of internal second guessing, is now the right time, and just had to push straight on, and hopefully, you know, we're not there for the next 5 minutes, we're there for the several generations that Eduardo mentioned. So I think you can talk about market timing, but I think you just need to decide, are you in or are you out? And if you're in, then you're in and you make the best of it. When I look across Africa and the Middle East, it's a very challenging region. You have the haves, we know who they are, and you have the have-nots. And we work more closely, perhaps with the have-nots, because they need our help more. And we can do that by being present on the ground. So I'm going to probably get told off, but you know, we consider ourselves to be a global emerging markets bank, but we don't really have a big presence here in Latin America. And that's something that I think we intend to fix over the coming years, because we can't lay claim to that title unless we have a greater presence here. We do have an office here in Brazil. But come on, Brazil is not Latin America. But you know, we hope to build our credibility here, and I look forward to partnering with many people in the room when we do.
I'm sure you're going to be welcomed, even by the competition. I'm sure you will be very welcome to him. Sheng, we've seen also in terms of like the connectivity we were talking earlier, and also bridging these gaps of confidence, initiatives such as the BRICS Bank, the New Development Bank, and another sort of a deeper dialogue. How do you see that helping bridge this gap?
I think Bank of China is a commercial bank. And I think the BRICS Bank is a different player, and they focus on the development and the social needs. So it's very complementary. So, for example, Bank of China cooperate with a local bank, Itaú Bradesco, or the private bank, and we have our focus on usually is focused on the trade finance and the supplier finance, and transition energy finance as well, sustainable link bonds. But when you turn to developer bank, it's totally different. They have a much longer, more than 10, 20 years, and their purpose is totally different from the commercial bank. And they got a tax benefit that we don't have. So I think this is all complementary, and we know that to help business to develop very well in Brazil, You need both, not only from the micro, from the entrepreneur side, but you also need very nice infrastructure to help to reduce the cost, as some of them mentioned before. So they are complementary. Sorry.
And Andrew, you mentioned earlier 20 years in a partnership in Brazil. What have you learned that you would impart as advice?
Yeah, so to echo, I think a couple of themes we've heard so far, being local matters, having boots on the ground, critically important. I'm going to add a couple as well. Don't underestimate the fat tail risk of a shock, because a small ripple can create a big shock. And that's the second lesson, which is if you're not prepared for that shock with both know-how and capital, it's hard to kind of see the other side and see that opportunity in a high growth region. What do I mean specifically by that? At our firm, most of us are both investors and operators with global experience and able to bring those best practices. And the same solution will likely apply to a business in Brazil, to Mexico, to the US, to somewhere in terms of a specific issue. The second one is having long-term partners like the Ministry of Investment or others who think more than a few years out. If you know that your capital base and have great partners like Standard Chartered, if you have partners like that, you can actually move a business forward without having to sort of watch your back. And so I think setting up a business for success is critically important, and a lot of lessons learned over time about not having that runway.
I want to have money to invest in Brazil with you guys. So, Bakir, I just wanted to give you the parting thoughts here, because I think this is I mean, in terms, it's an exciting new relationship that is sparkling. So you're looking at the region as a whole, so just your last thoughts on you already mentioned sectors and all that, but what do you expect this relationship to become in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think we've done a great momentum with the government relations, signing bilateral investment treaties, agreements, protection. In fact, a lot of the Saudi private sector, when they go to Latin America, they like to tailgate with the government just to feel that they can understand the market. But what I see it in the next 5 to 10 years is for the private sector, especially the family offices, to come together and they speak the same language together. That's the magic of putting those two together. We signed an agreement with the EB Capital in Riyadh just 2 weeks ago with that focus. The lasting of that will be for decades and more. And we need to emphasize on building that bridge of the private sector together.
Next, officers, are you guys want to do, you plan on branching out of Brazil?
No, I think we have so much to do in Brazil that we want to help bringing, investors and bringing people to this country, so then this can be a really global opportunity, But I also think that Brazil has to, increase its self-esteem and be able to, have more like a global ambitions. Brazil is huge, and this is a gift, but it's also a curse, because a lot of the Brazilian companies end up being satisfied or fulfilled with what we have here. And we have state-of-the-art companies that can be playing globally, So that's something, when we talk about bridge, that's what I think we should do.
We just need more of those, right?
Exactly.
More companies going out. Well, thank you so much. This has been incredible, great learning. And thank you all for being here with us and sharing your energy. I invite you to stay put, because there's a lot more coming. This is a fantastic conference.
Thank you
for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.